Justice is supposed to be blind. It should not recognize race, it should not recognize wealth, and it should never recognize power. But what happens when millions of people begin asking whether the world's highest criminal court has treated some nations differently from others? And what happens when 3 countries decide they no longer believe the system works for them? That is exactly what is unfolding in West Africa today. Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. 3 neighboring nations, one shared decision, and a move that has reignited one of the biggest debates in international justice. Is the International Criminal Court truly impartial, or has confidence in the institution begun to crack? This isn't just a legal story, it's a story about sovereignty, trust, power, and Africa's growing determination to shape its own future. Today on AfriArise, we explore why these 3 countries are leaving the International Criminal Court, what the court says in response, and why the decision is attracting attention far beyond Africa. Welcome to AfriArise. This is where we explore Africa's thorough facts, history, and thoughtful conversations, not headlines alone. Our goal isn't just to tell you what to think, it's to help you understand why events unfold the way they do. And today's story is one of the most significant diplomatic developments on the continent in recent years. Because when Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger announced that they were leaving the International Criminal Court, commonly known as the ICC, it wasn't simply another political headline. It reopened a debate that has existed for decades. Can international justice truly be fair if some of the world's most powerful nations remain outside the very system expected to judge everyone else? To understand why this matters, we first need to understand what the ICC actually is and why these 3 countries believe it no longer serves their interests. What is ICC? The International Criminal Court was created in 2002 after the Rome Statute entered the force. Its purpose was ambitious: to investigate and prosecute individuals accused of the world's gravest crimes. This includes genocide, crime against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Unlike national courts, the ICC is designed to step in only when countries are unwilling or unable to prosecute these crimes themselves. Supporters see the court as an important safeguard against impunity. They argue that no leader, military commander, or political figure should be above the law. But critics have long questioned whether the court has applied that principle equally. Over the years, a large number of ICC investigations focus on African conflicts. Many African governments initially supported the court. In fact, several investigations were opened after African countries themselves requested ICC involvement. Yet, as the years passed, concerns began to grow. Some leaders argued that while African officials faced investigations and prosecutions, allegations involving powerful countries often appeared to receive a different level of attention or political resistance. The ICC has constantly rejected accusations of bias. Court officials maintain that their decisions are based on evidence, legal jurisdiction, and international law, and not politics. Still, perception matters, and in international institutions, trust is just as important as legal authority. For Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, that trust has steadily eroded. In 2025, 3 members of the Alliance of Sahel States announced a decision that surprised many observers. They intended to withdraw from the Rome Statute, the treaty that established the International Criminal Court. Their government has argued that the court has become selective and increasingly politicized. In official communications submitted through the international nations withdrawal process, they stated that the institution no longer reflected the principles of equal justice they believed it was created to uphold. Legally, however, leaving the ICC not immediate. Under the Rome Statute, a country must submit a formal notice of withdrawal to the Secretary General of the United Nations. The withdrawal only becomes effective 1 year after the notification is received. That means the legal process continues for months before membership officially ends. As these notifications were formally submitted in mid-2026, the countdown began. Unless the government reversed their decision, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are expected to leave the courts after the required notice period expires. The announcement immediately drew international attention, not only because 3 neighboring countries were acting together, but because they belong to a region already undergoing profound politics and security changes. Military governments have replaced previous administrations. Regional alliances are being reshaped. Foreign military partnerships have shifted. And now, international legal institutions are also becoming part of the transformation. For supporters of the withdrawal, this is about restoring sovereignty. They argue that African nations should strengthen their own judicial institutions rather than depend on international courts they no longer trust. Others strongly disagree. Human rights organizations warn that withdrawing from the ICC could make it harder for victims of serious crimes to obtain justice, especially when domestic legal systems are under pressure. These competing perspectives are exactly why this story has become so significant. Because beneath the legal document lies a much larger question. What happens when confidence in an international institution begins to fade? And perhaps more importantly, why is this debate gaining momentum now? That answer begins with the ICC's own response, and what the court said next revealed just how much was at stake. When Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger formally began the process of leaving the International Criminal Court, the response from the Hague was swift. The Court Assembly of States Parties, the body responsible for overseeing the ICC, said it viewed the withdrawals with deep concern. It expressed regret over the decision and encouraged the 3 countries to continue engaging with the court. The message was respectful rather than confrontational. Court officials emphasized that international justice depends on cooperation between member states. They also warned that when countries leave the Rome Statute, it could weaken global efforts to hold perpetrators of serious crimes accountable. From the ICC's perspectives, this wasn't simply about 3 countries withdrawing. It was about protecting an international system built over more than 2 decades. The court has always relied on the support of its member states. Unlike national governments, the ICC has no police force. It has no army. It cannot send officers across borders to make arrests. Its authority depends entirely on countries choosing to cooperate. That reality makes every member important, especially when multiple countries decide to live together. For many observers, the ICC statement reflects concern about the future of international justice. For others, it suggested something different. They saw it as evidence that the court understood the symbolic weight of losing 3 nations at the same time. Whatever interpretation one prefers, one fact is clear. This was no ordinary withdrawal. It had become a global conversation. But another development unfolding almost simultaneously added an entirely new dimension to that conversation. Around the same period, the United States once again made its own position on international criminal courts unmistakably clear. The US government reiterated that it does not recognize ICC jurisdiction over American citizens. This was not a sudden policy change. In fact, the relationship between Washington and the ICC has always been complicated. Although the United States signed the Rome Statute in 2000 and it never ratified the treaty. Without ratification, the country never became a full member of the court. A few years later, the US formally informed the United Nations that it did not intend to become a party to the treaty. Over the years, successive American administrations have maintained varying degrees of distance from the ICC. Some cooperated with specific investigations, others others openly criticized the court. The strongest tensions emerged when the ICC investigations involved US personnel close to American allies. Earlier in 2025, the United States imposed sanctions on several ICC officials following disagreements over investigations related to the conflict in Gaza. Those sanctions drew criticism from government and legal experts who argued that they could undermine judicial independence. Supporters of the US position responded that protecting national sovereignty remained a fundamental principle. This disagreement illustrates one of the central debates surrounding international justice. Can an international court exercise authority over citizens of countries that have never joined it? The ICC argues that, in certain circumstances, it can, especially when alleged crimes occur within the territory of member states or when situations are referred by the United Nations Security Council. Critics argue that such authority stretches beyond what sovereign nations can accept. This legal disagreement has existed for years, but as African governments reassess their relationship with the courts, the debate has become impossible to ignore. Many people across Africa now ask one difficult question. If some of the world's most powerful nations remain outside the ICC, should African countries continue placing their trust in it? There is no simple answer, but understanding Africa's relationship with the court helps to explain why this question refuses to disappear. When the Rome Statute was adopted in 1998, African countries played a major role in supporting it. Many governments believed an international criminal court will help end impunity for some humanity's worst crimes. Today, Africa remains one of the largest regional groups within the ICC's membership. For years, that support reflected genuine optimism. Many leaders hoped the court would strengthen international justice and protect vulnerable populations. Yet, over time, tensions begin to emerge. A significant number of the ICC's early investigations involved African countries. Some of these investigations were initiated at the request of African governments themselves. Others were referred by the United Nations Security Council. Nevertheless, the concentration of African cases become increasingly controversial. Critics argue that while African leaders appear regularly before the courts, allegations involving powerful nations often encountered political obstacles or moved much more slowly. The ICC has consistently rejected the accusation that it unfairly targets Africa. Court officials point out that many African investigations began because the countries themselves invited the ICC to intervene. They also note that jurisdiction depends on legal rules rather than political preferences. Still, perception matters, and over the years, several African governments have openly questioned whether the system applies international law equally to everyone. The debate reached a turning point more than a decade ago. The African Union discussed the possibility of a collective withdrawal from the ICC. Although no continent-wide withdrawal occurred, the conversation revealed growing frustration among several member states. Since then, individual countries have continued to release their membership. Burundi became the first nation to officially leave the court in 2017. The Philippines later withdrew. Now, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have chosen the same path. Whether more countries will follow remains uncertain, but the conversation has clearly evolved. It is no longer only about specific court cases. It is about confidence. Confidence in international institutions, confidence in equal treatment, and confidence that justice is applied without regard to political influence. These concerns have become even more significant because the Sahel itself faces enormous security challenges. Terrorist groups continue to operate across borders. Communities have suffered years of violence. Thousands of civilians have been displaced, which raises perhaps the most important question of all. If countries lose confidence in international justice, what alternative do they believe can deliver accountability? That is where this story becomes even more complex, because leaving the ICC does not automatically solve the challenge of delivering justice. In fact, it may simply shift the responsibility closer to home. One of the biggest misconceptions about the International Criminal Court is that it functions like a global police agency. It doesn't. The ICC cannot send officers into another country to make arrests. It has no military. It has no independent police force. Its investigations, arrest warrants, and trial depend almost entirely on the cooperation of governments. Without that cooperation, even the strongest legal decision can remain unenforced for years. History offers several examples. Some individuals wanted by the courts were arrested because national government chose to cooperate. Others remained beyond the court's reach for long periods because these governments refused. This is not unique to the ICC. Many international institutions rely on willingness of sovereign states to enforce international law. That really has become particularly important in the Sahel. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are currently fighting armed insurgencies that have claimed thousands of lives and displaced millions of people. The government argue that restoring security requires strong institutions rather than greater dependence on international organizations. Supporters believe domestic courts and potentially regional African judicial mechanisms should play a greater role in prosecuting crimes committed on African soil. Critics caution that building effective judicial institutions takes time. They argue that the international courts can provide an additional layer of accountability, especially in situations where national systems are overwhelmed or politically constrained. Both perspectives raise important questions. Should justice always be delivered internationally, or should countries strengthen their own legal systems until they no longer need outside intervention? There is no universal answer. Every nation must find its own balance between sovereignty and international cooperation. A bigger shift is happening. Whether one supports or opposes the decision by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, one thing is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Africa is changing. Across the continent, governments are reconsidering long-standing relationships with international institutions. Some are seeking new economic partnerships. Some are expanding regional cooperation. Many are placing greater emphasis on political independence and self-determination. The Alliance of Sahel States is one example of this broader trend. Its leaders have spoken repeatedly about reducing external dependence and strengthening cooperation among neighboring countries. The withdrawal from the ICC fits into their wider political vision. At some time, the debate is no longer limited to Africa. Questions about international institutions are being asked across many parts of the world. How should international law be enforced? Who decides when justice is applied? Can global institutions remain credible if major world power chooses not to participate? These are questions without easy answers. They require honest discussion rather than simple slogan. Because justice is not only about laws, it is also about legitimacy. People must believe that institutions are fair. They must believe that similar situations will receive similar treatment. Once that confidence begins to weaken, rebuilding it can take years. That is perhaps the greatest challenge facing the ICC today. Not simply retaining member states, but maintaining trust. The decision of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger does not mark the end of international justice, nor does it automatically prove that the ICC has failed. What it does reveal is something equally important. Many African governments and citizens are asking difficult questions about the institutions created to serve the international community. Some believe the ICC remains an essential safeguard against impunity. Others believe the court has lost credibility because justice appears unevenly applied. Both perspectives deserve to be heard because meaningful reform begins with honest conversations. As Africa continues to grow politically, economically, and diplomatically, these debates are likely to become even more significant. The choices made today could influence how justice is pursued across the country for decades to come. Will more countries reconsider their membership in the ICC? Will African regional institutions take on a larger judicial role? Or will reforms within the ICC restore confidence among those who have become skeptical? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: this conversation is no longer about 3 countries alone. It is about future relationships between Africa and the international institutions that shape our world. And whatever happens next, the decision made today will become part of tomorrow's history. If you found this documentary insightful, consider subscribing to AfriArise. Here, we go beyond the headlines to explore African stories with context, balance, and evidence. We believe understanding begins with asking better questions and not accepting easy answers. Now, we would like to hear from you. Do you think international justice needs reform, or do you believe institutions like the ICC remains essential in today's world? Share your thoughts respectively in the comments below. If you enjoyed this documentary, give it a like and share with someone who values informed conversations about Africa. Thank you for watching. My name is Blessing Chris. See you in the next one.